It's so great to have the last 2 hours of the day to speak with you. And we're here till 5, right? Just kidding. No. Actually, when I was invited to do this portion of the program, my first instinct was to say no. My second instinct was to say, rather than introducing a new topic, why don't we use the last session to review all the things that we've learned today? So I thought that was a way out of having to work on a presentation until today came, right? And I was like, oh my gosh, I have to try to get around to every session and find people to help me curate some of this content. So it's been a lot of fun being with you and being in different sessions and hearing different people speak. So this will be like a walk down memory lane for you all. For those of you who have difficulty with short-term memory, this will hopefully prompt some flashbacks from today. So just to get us started, here we go again. See, it's not Heidi. Oh, it is Heidi. She left, so we can say that now. I just wanted to kind of start with kind of our leadership journey. We're all on a very similar path, right? We all start here. We all have this in common, Illinois State University. And, that sign, I can't tell you how many times I've driven to campus. I'm sure you've all done it a million times as well, right? So, there's the signs that take you to Springfield, and there's the signs that lead you to Chicago and St. Louis and Bloomington Normal. And I guess I think of leadership journey as it really is like this roadway that can take you all different places. And sometimes you're on that road and it's sunny and it's warm and it's exciting. You're really looking forward to where you're heading, your destination. Other times you're not really sure, like when you first come to campus. What's waiting for you there? What's it going to be like? Last night when I drove down, it was raining really hard, and it was one lane in many places. And again, it reminds me it's the same journey, right? But it's different every time. And I think that's one of the things I've taken away from today's talks, is that we're all on the same road, but we're all experiencing it differently. And yet we know where we're going, right? We have a sense of our destination, but we can't anticipate all the things we're going to discover along the way. It's going to do that thing where you do it like 4 times and it jumps. Okay. Well, we're here. We're back. All right. So one of the things I think is kind of fun to think about, and I hope you'll do the same thing for yourselves, is to think about your leadership journey. And the stepping stones is sort of how I think about it. You start somewhere and you move to the next thing, and then you go over here, and then you go over this direction. You don't really know how to map out what your leadership journey is going to look like. But again, thinking about how we've talked today about it's not just the academics, but it's the student activities that sort of define who we are. And so for me, I think about my time at Illinois State back in the 80s. It starts really with trying to figure out who I wanted to be, what I wanted to pursue, what I wanted to learn. Academically, it was getting involved, as so many of you have done, which is you keep hearing today is so important, and it's going to make a huge difference in your life once you leave the university land here. Taking advantage of the different positions that you can have. We heard about that in one of our sessions today. Actually, my first job was at Illinois State University, so I didn't anticipate that, and some of you may end up working at Illinois State once you finish your undergrad or graduate studies. And so again, having an opportunity to do something that I loved and to be able to do it a little bit longer was terrific. It allowed me to develop some subject matter expertise when I was in grad school here, and then moved me through to the Chicago area where I do healthcare and association work. So, they are stepping stones. Every stone leads you to another stone, right? So where you are today is helping you get to where you're going to be tomorrow. And I really want to commend the students who are here at this program, because you could be so many other places, especially at this time of day on a Saturday. But I think of this as a stepping stone in your leadership journey. Right now, your leadership journey as a student, but as you reflect on all the places that you've learned and have had growth experiences, I do think you'll remember this, and hopefully you'll get to participate in it again next year as well. All right, it worked. So one of the things I think that's really important for all of us to remember is we are on this journey as leaders And it's a career-long endeavor, right? It never ends. We're always developing ourselves. We're always refining our leadership skills. And so it's incumbent upon us to continue to do that and to find sources of inspiration, books, people who motivate us, who help inspire us and keep us strong and steady in our work, as President Dietz likes to say. I think that's true. I think that's what we need as leaders. I think we can also work together to curate information and content. I think that's what today's really been all about. There's been a lot of work that went into putting together a program that emphasized the skills and strategies we need to be effective leaders now and in the future. And I think you will find yourselves throughout your life being a part of that kind of a community, not just what you can take for yourselves, but what you can help others access. And so I suspect that many of you are already doing that, and you'll continue to do that, which is a really remarkable thing. And so you'll get involved in things beyond your jobs. And I think that's really important, whether it's your community, your university community, or wherever you choose to engage and provide leadership support. And then sharing. So, we'll talk a bit about what do you take from this and who do you share it with? If you just take it home and think about it and put it in a notebook and you don't pass it on to anyone else, then it's very limited. And so I want you to be thinking about how you're going to share some of the knowledge from this day spent together. All right. And then the next part of that continuum is really about finding the content, right? So as we talked about at the beginning, we have had people here who have helped us find and organize a lot of information in a very short amount of time that will be very helpful to us. Curate, I guess I just need to be patient. It's another trait of leadership, right? So curating your leadership knowledge, I think, again, for those of you who are students or who are professionals here on campus or in the community, you really have the benefit of Illinois State all the time. As a place you can go and get inspiration and leadership and do some training for yourself or take some courses. I just also wanted you to think about the fact that once you leave here, there's opportunities, again, to come back and do the things we're doing together. As part of the Alumni Association, when Michelle Guadalupe was reminding our table today that when you graduate, you become a part of the Alumni Association. You don't have to pay dues to belong, you don't have to fill out a form. And so there are over 200,000 of us out there, and we are everywhere. So when you leave campus, you don't have to leave Illinois State behind. In fact, you just join a larger community of people who are interested in learning and growth. And those individuals are everywhere. So think about your leadership journey as not ending here with graduation, but actually continuing beyond graduation as an alum. You'll be an alumni much longer than you were a student. Well, I think so. Is Mike Shermer still here? Maybe not. Some people take classes for years and years, and if you're a lifelong learner, you will be doing that too. But you'll be an ISU alumni forever. So as we talk about what we want to share, I think it's helpful to look at what are the takeaways from today. And whenever I come to Bloomington Normal or back to campus, I always have at least one takeaway, and it's what I usually physically take back home with me, which is Avanti's sandwiches. So I usually have to stop by on the way out and pick them up, and then our neighbors know about it if they went to Illinois State. And then I usually break into one about halfway home, and I'm trying to put the mayonnaise on there, without crashing. But anyways, so one of my takeaways is always Avanti's. It probably will be today as well. But as far as the conference takeaways, I've tried to narrow them down to 10. And so, it's really amazing when you see them all in one place. And I know you all took notes in your notebook, and this has been captured for other purposes on video. But I think when we remember how we started this morning with Ashley, and what a remarkable session that was, and how inspiring it is to hear what she's doing already and in such a short amount of time. It made it sound like she'd been out for like 10 years, didn't it? When she was describing all the different decisions she's made and the choices that she's pursued. I think what we learned from Ashley that's important for all of us is that knowing what your reason is and what your motivation is and what your passion is really critical to whatever you choose to do in your career professionally. I liked when she talked about the fact that when we get asked those questions, whether it's when you're in grade school or even when you're home for break in college and people ask you, what are you going to do or what do you want to be when you grow up, right? It's a really kind of annoying question because I don't know that we really ever know that, right? We just know what we want to do next or what we're doing currently. And so I liked how she named that. And also the fact that who you are and what you decide to do affects not only yourself but others. She talked about her family quite a bit. She talked about other people who are counting on her to be successful and who are in her corner, and I think that's really important to remember, as well as people that you might work with or you might have responsibilities for supervising in the future. So your leadership affects them as well, and your choices do also. And that while we can be really passionate and think this is what we're going to do our whole lives or this is what we wanted to do now, we might discover that new pathways present themselves, and it's fun to explore those. And it doesn't mean that you're not passionate about what you were doing previously. It just means that there might be another opportunity for you. And I think Heidi just shared a little bit about that as well. Jim Bennett. Where's Jim? There he is. He's still here. You're very good, Jim. You're sitting down in one place, not overly distracted. That's great. So I liked when Jim talked about the fact that we all have the opportunity to focus on what captures our attention. And for some of us, lots of things catch our attention throughout the day. But I think, the idea of focusing on whatever is in front of you that you need to pay attention to is really, really powerful. Also that it's okay to be uncomfortable at times in your leadership work. And that it's, our work can be fun if we surround ourselves with people who enjoy what they do. And I think as leaders, it's incumbent upon us to make sure that people are enjoying what they do as well. I liked Jim's comment about it's a gift to be in service to others. I think a lot of people in this room are exploring or working in nonprofit roles. And there are other ways you can be of service to people as well, but I think there's quite a few of us that end up in that type of work. Also, we've talked a little bit about, not just Jim, but others, that working in teams is really important and coalescing with others. So when you're doing your projects on campus in your major where you have to work with groups, I know sometimes that can be frustrating, but it's actually how it works in the real world too. You've got everybody that you work with has a role to play in whatever you're developing and doing together. And sometimes you need to work with somebody else's vision, and that's also a big part of what we do really in any organization setting. There's very few people who get to decide what's going to happen and then make it happen. I also liked Jim talking about how Illinois State prepares us to be leaders, and I think we're all grateful for that, and we've seen lots of examples of that here today. All right, next slide. It just occurred to me, I wonder if I'm actually the one that's even moving it when I do it. I think they're helping me back there, which I appreciate. Mike Minton had a couple of sessions today, and while I didn't get to attend all of it, I had some help in identifying what people valued about that session, which was that students overestimate their career skills, and they don't fully appreciate how much volunteering and the work that you do as volunteers and involvement matters when you're leaving or looking for an opportunity. It's something that really will and does set you apart. And also, I think probably not a shock to those of us who are already out in the work world, but very few people actually end up doing exactly what they studied in college. So again, these involvement skills that we're developing really come into play. And there's people who pursue a very specific technical path in college are not always doing that 10 years later. And I think that's exciting, and it's also can be a little overwhelming if you're spending a lot of time studying one thing. But you get to make those choices, which is exciting as well. Transferable skills are important. I'll tell you, writing is great. When I find a new staff person who's a great writer, I'm really excited. I see a lot of people in the workplace saying, they'll do like what I would call a first draft, and then they think it's ready to go. So if you can develop those transferable skills like writing and communications, I think those will serve you well wherever you go. And that came out of Mike's session as well. There's also a lot of opportunities and choices There's just a lot of things we could do in life, we could pursue. And I like that Mike talks about, really narrowing it down and considering the things that are best for you based upon your strengths, your skills, and your interests. And not necessarily what other people tell you should do, but you want to explore that on your own. And that networking starts early in life, certainly in high school, hopefully in college at the very least, and it really continues all the way through our professional experiences. All right, number 7, we're working our way down. David had some interesting observations and thoughts. He talked about campus involvement again, so you can hear these themes. It does matter and it does count for something when you get out there and you're looking for your job, your next job or your first job. And also sometimes, there's things that you envision doing that it's not obvious where you go to do that. And I think, electronic sports and gaming is a good example. When I was going through school and I wanted to work with older adults in a more of a business way, people looked at me like that was odd, so I took classes in sociology and I took classes in business and classes in psychology and home economics around family lives and families in later life, and I sort of cobbled together what I needed to learn and know. And so I think that's good to remember too, that you're developing skills that are transferable, as we've talked about, and that maybe the job that you really want to do isn't even out there yet, and that's kind of exciting to think about. Also, he talked about the fact that sometimes you read these job descriptions and you think, well, you have to be able to check all those boxes off. But really, it's just sort of a vision of what somebody's perceiving the job would be. But if you go in and you are able to talk to them about some other things that they haven't identified that are valuable to them, then you might have a shot. You might be able to do something different, or you might be able to move into a role and do it differently than somebody else has. Soft experiences and hard skills together is what really makes everybody more well-rounded. And I thought it was interesting that there's some research and some information that was shared about the right amount of involvement. Sometimes we can try to do too many things and we're avoiding maybe some of the other parts of our lives, and that can, sometimes being overly involved can cause challenges for us as well. I'm not going to share that one with my family though. All right, moving to number 6, Danielle and her group had a chance to talk about generational differences. Generation Z in particular got a lot of time and attention, and millennials a little bit, not as much as they're accustomed to. And actually, I'm getting tired of hearing all the time in sort of business setting about millennials and these sort of stereotypes and generalizations. So I thought this session was great because it really talked about the fact that generations are defined by shared experiences, not necessarily age or when you were born. And there's different versions of all these generations because they extend over multiple years and cohort groups. And today we are definitely in a multi-generational workforce, and that's only going to continue to be the case. And so how we adapt with each other and how we begin to change our perceptions of people, I think is going to be really important, and that was highlighted as well. So again, partnering with people, not seeing people as in an adversarial way because they're from a different generation. And again, we need to recognize that we're going to have even more generations in the workplace as we go forward. There was some good Gen Z discussion as well about misperceptions for Gen Z and millennials, I think, as well. And so these were good reminders of what some of those were. Some other takeaways from John and Oliver's session were really interesting. They had a nice dialogue about the fact that sometimes you take different, you start here and then you think you're going to do something and you end up going back maybe to where you began. And John was talking quite a bit about that in his session. Every industry, as you listen to somebody who's passionate about what they do, even if it's something that you don't know well or maybe can't relate to specifically, you just see the same sort of leadership qualities. And I think leaders are able to articulate what they're passionate about. And I think that happened. Both gentlemen in that session were able to articulate that really well and share it with each other and those in the room. They also talked quite a bit about, again, what it's like to be in school and to have these experiences. They're not always, things that are designed to make you comfortable. And again, I thought some practical tips around how to empower people that work for you as a leader. And also that there was this great discussion about GEMS, which was a lot of what was discussed related to John's professional world. But, there was conversation about when you're really good at something or you really are excited about something, how that can be contagious, right? And how that can drive how you lead and live your life, and how your work life and your personal life can also sometimes be blended together. And number 4, working our way, Kathy Hempstead had a group of people. I thought it was really interesting because this was like a session that wasn't what I was expecting, but it was really interesting, I think, to hear more about, sort of what benefits look like for people in the work world. I wish I had had more information about that before I started or graduated. I thought she did a nice job of sort of describing that, you have choices and a responsibility and an opportunity once you start earning an income to determine how you want to live your life and how you want to save, and explained a bit about the different types of insurance, and also the fact that these are benefits, and these are benefits to people who work, and yet we also pay into those benefits, right? So if you're going to utilize all the services, you're also going to pay for a good portion of those if you choose to. Sometimes you need to. But I thought it was really interesting the way she also talked about what you can do with your resources, and encourage people to not just live, pay their living expenses, but also to invest in themselves and to others and to things that they're passionate about, which is a nice thing to think about. We also got to hear, some of us, from Maria Tate, who gave a really dynamic presentation about her work and her journey that's led her back to campus, and talking about building professional networks, connecting with people who aren't like you, like taking the opportunity when you're in a campus environment in particular to get to know different people and have different experiences, to invest in yourself, as we've heard, is another theme. And I liked her notion of doing goal setting and doing kind of an analysis of where you are early in your career, rather than sort of waiting until you're unhappy or you feel like it's time for you to do something else. She talked about, again, being flexible, recognizing that your first job may not be the dream job, but it's the one that's going to get you the kinds of experiences that will help you determine what you'd like to do next, or maybe it is a dream job. You don't know until you really get in there and get started. She also talked about taking risk and doing some things that maybe are scary. I think we heard about that also from Heidi, and also yet are exciting. And sometimes scary and exciting live really close to one another. So there is fear involved in taking risk, and leadership is often about risk taking. And then finally, she emphasized that culture and fit are really important, and sometimes we're excited about the job, but we haven't considered, sort of the culture and the people we'll be working with. And that's really one of the big discoveries that happens to people when they end up in the workplace. They might like the job. In fact, they decided to take the job, but then they get there and they struggle with the environment. I won't recap Heidi because it was so recent that I'm sure you remember all of the things she said and all her slides that eventually got up on the screen there. And number one, I think I just wanted to kind of group together some of the unique experiences that we had while we were here today. So I think for those of you who put together programs and events, it's really easy to sort of over-program and to put everything, just keep bringing in more people to talk. But I think this particular session was great because we had some meaningful dialogue at breakfast, at lunch, and during the human library. I particularly, bonded with my two tables, not just because we were eating, although eating does bring people together, right? Like breaking bread together. But we had some really dynamic discussions about alternative spring breaks and sort of career paths and different experiences people have had since they've been here at Illinois State. We found people who didn't know each other that were sitting next to each other, one that was wanting to get her master's degree in social work and another that had just completed her master's degree in social work. I found I had people in common with many of the individuals at my table. So I think, again, taking the opportunity to meet new people and creating the space and the place for that to happen as leaders, we can get overwhelmed with the amount of things that we're responsible for making sure happens. And that can sometimes mean that we forego these sort of opportunities to encourage people to go to programs like these and to create space for your team to make sure they have a chance to talk about how things are going and to connect on some other issues. So what do we do with all this at this point, essentially? We could just walk away and be done, or we could think a little bit about how we want to take this back out into the real world or back to our apartments or back to our homes. So I would encourage you to adopt this practice. So whenever you go to any sort of program or session, before you leave, I would jot down 3 things that you want to do as a result of this experience. What is it? How are you going to hold yourself accountable to make sure it happens? So by when? If you need somebody to kind of be a part of that accountability with you, then maybe you share this with somebody when you get back to the office or a friend or a colleague. And what's the impact that action is going to have? So just be thinking about this now, because again, I hope independently you'll jot some of this down. I think if you try to do more than 3, you might overwhelm yourself, but if you've been here all day and you don't have at least 3 things that you want to do as a result of the experience, then I would question that as well. You should walk out with at least a few items that you want to pursue. So just wanted to quickly have you spend a few minutes back with your table, because I think it's important to also have an opportunity to share with one another about what you enjoyed about your experience here. And then also on the next slide. Oh, now I went too far. That's the last slide. What is one of the things that you jotted down or that you're thinking about that you want to do as a result of this experience? Okay, so what did you like and what do you plan to do? So we're going to take just a few minutes to talk. And actually, I think I'd ask you to talk to one person at your table. So let's make this a dialogue rather than trying to get everybody around the table talking to each other. So pick one person at your table or nearby you. We're just going to take about 3 minutes to do that. Okay. Wow, some good interaction there. It's from up here anyways, I can really see everybody talking and sharing. So one other thing I would ask you to do before you leave, whoever you just shared that thought with of something that you're planning to do, I would encourage you to exchange email address with that person, and then for you to check in on each other on that one thing. It will get you connected, keep you connected with somebody you might not otherwise know or be visiting with, and all it takes is one of you to send the message to the other one to say, hey, how's it going? Did you have a chance to do that? How did it work? Right? And then hopefully that'll prompt the person to respond and maybe ask that same question back. So even if you both don't, initiate, if one of you initiates it, the likelihood of you actually implementing something that you took away from this program is much greater. So maybe jot down an email address if you're comfortable doing that, or however you want to reconnect with that partner. And a couple of kind of closing thoughts. I think I like this quote from Margaret Mead, and you can read it, and I'm sure you've seen it before. But again, I think it's really powerful for us to all appreciate that how much we can accomplish when we're motivated, and how our thoughtfulness and our commitments to really change the world and make the world a better place can really have an impact. And our world can be defined in a lot of different ways, right? Our world is wherever we have the opportunity to influence. So for some of us, that world might be an organization that we belong to, or it might be our family. Maybe our family is experiencing some difficulties or in transition. Your world might just be a coworker that you're concerned about, or a friend that you want to be supportive of. So don't think of world as, the globe, because that can certainly be overwhelming. From the anthropology and sociological perspective, Margaret Mead was not really referring to the entire planet as much as she was cueing us that we can do things within our own communities to make a difference. And that's where it starts. It's interesting, my kids go to Margaret Mead Middle School, and it's right down the street from our house in Elk Grove Village. And I was obsessed at one point about the fact that none of them knew who Margaret Mead was. And I started writing to the principal asking if could they, put something up, like some of her quotes, and make sure that the students, who knew who she was and, why their school was named after her. So anyways, I think I've become like a Margaret Mead fan in later life here. So we'll just flip to the next one here, and I guess what I would just encourage you to do are these three things. Live your life, do what brings you joy. If you know what brings you joy and you can pursue that, that will allow you to continue to learn and to lead. And again, I think these are responsibilities that we all have because we've already are leaning into this notion of doing more than just showing up. We want to make the world a better place. We want to help our communities grow. We want to focus on social justice. We want to focus on just being the best we can be at whatever we're doing. And we want others to thrive as well. So if you just focus on making sure you're doing the best with your life that you can, that you're learning and you're growing and you're leading, I believe that you'll have a very significant impact on those who are around you and also for yourself and collectively for this university and this community. I think that about wraps it up. I did want to thank the team of people that when it occurred to me that it would be hard to be in 4 rooms at once. The staff, Aaron, Elena, Megan, and Casey for gathering some perspectives and insights from some of the various sessions that we could build this in sort of real time today. And then we had breakfast table number 1. We decided that was our name because we thought we were having the best conversation in the room. And I was taking notes on some of what they were sharing. And then the lunch table of nonprofit peeps, I think also we had some really dynamic discussion. I know all of you did in your small groups as well, but these folks helped me sort of think about what to pull out of the sessions and put in this to share with you. So this will be shared somehow, some way, I'm sure, with all of us. So if you didn't take notes and you want to refer back, hopefully they'll be helpful to you. But I appreciate your time and attention, and all of you for staying to the bitter end here. It's been a great day, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.